Hello, good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. So.
Well, I wish it were a much more beautiful morning because a lot of people are yet to get petrol, but I'm carried okay.
Do you have to? Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makin.
It's a very present
Don't
problem.
just remind me that I need to get fuel.
Oh, you need to, right?
Don't remind me.
But I mean extra because it's got full tanks. Full tanks.
I need to go with you.
Well, thanks for the vote of confidence.
Maybe we can split it, you know,
Split
for old
what?
time's sake.
Split. What are we splitting?
Full tank. A friend in need.
Full tanks.
Yeah.
Of what?
Wow. Plural.
Of what? No, I like it when you say it, Liz. Don't forget that he's the friend of governors.
Okay.
And don't forget.
I didn't get
What
this
has that got
memo.
to do with you?
You just wanted to put it in somehow, you know.
Oh, okay, because they have full tanks and I have no full tank.
Come on,
Oh,
man.
goodness.
Okay.
It is a very, very
Well, they've
terrible
assured us that we'll get fuel. When was that again? Before the end of this month?
Yeah. Well,
next week.
They said the fuel queues would disappear. What before?
No,
the end
but
of
they
the
decided
week?
last week, I thought.
These are things we hear almost every day.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it doesn't sound good if you hear these things time and again and you hit the streets or you're on the road and it hasn't really taken that kind of effect.
We need to even find out exactly what is happening around this matter because, I mean, we did a bit of a calculation yesterday. So we have, say, 1 billion liters of petrol. How many cars do we have in Nigeria? On the average, maybe 15 million cars in Nigeria. Okay, divide 1 billion liters by 50 liters on the average. That's about 20 million cars.
How many jerry cans?
Okay.
Generators.
Well, that's there.
Well, I think what I like was the fact that there was a limit. You can't buy beyond 5,000. I think it makes sense. I was at a filling station last week. I mean, that's the last time I got petrol, by the way. And that was the limit, 5,000. And it makes sense because you can't go beyond that, and more people can buy petrol.
Some that's 3,000. But don't forget to check at what price.
Well, mine
I know
was the
people are
normal
usually in a
rate.
hurry. Some way above the 165 naira per liter.
Oh, gosh.
But, yeah, well just that the authorities need to find a way to see what's happening out there and then address it. And speaking of which, ASUU, yes, we all know that ASUU has been up in arms with government for some time now. They have embarked on strike. And the Minister of Education, after the meeting in Abuja, the Executive Council meeting, had this briefing, which they usually do, and he spoke to journalists. They took him up on some questions about ASUU, education, and guess what? Here's what he said. Just listen to this report. We'll take it from there afterwards.
The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, presides over the week's Federal Executive Council meeting with 8 ministers in the chamber and the others attending virtually. Among the diverse and critical issues, the 1-month warning industrial action embarked upon by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, came to the fore. The Minister of Education tells State House correspondents that he is looking for ASUU.
ASUU, unfortunately, they have gone on strike, and I'm just looking for them because all the issues are being addressed. The last thing that happened was the committee that looked at their demands, the renegotiation that is going on, and they submitted a draft agreement which the ministry is looking at. The committee is looking at it. Immediately it finishes, the government will announce what it has accepted of that. Then suddenly I had them going on strike. So I'm looking for us.
He reacts to several allegations by ASUU, some of which is that the minister has consistently shunned negotiation meetings and that the federal government does not want a peaceful resolution to the crisis. The minister denies them all.
I always call the meeting myself. The meeting that I didn't attend was when I was in hospital in Germany. Because the federal government is ready to meet them on all the issues they have raised. And if there are so many meetings and then the gap is not closing, I think it's not the fault of government.
In the back and forth, the minister equally responded to questions on whether or not the government can advance an agreement with the university lecturers before the end of the 30-day warning strike.
There is a solution. The negotiation that has been going on is the solution. And that is why I told you I'm so surprised that ASUU has gone on strike. I'm ready to reach agreement with ASUU now. But since I'm not the only one, I can't give you time. But certainly we are going to reach agreement and it will be very soon.
The Education Minister further defended the dissimilar cut-off marks for Southern and Northern prospective common entrance admission candidates for unity schools, which appear discriminatory. Mr. Damu explains that the arrangement is in line with the federal character principle and nothing can be done about it. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Gentlemen, discuss.
Well, at this point, we're looking for ASUU. And we had ASUU 2 days ago and last week.
The MIA, yeah?
Yeah, and the joke came out that, okay, maybe the minister could get in touch with the producer of Sunrise Daily, because clearly we know where to get ASUU, and it looks like government does not know where to get ASUU. I just want to imagine he's speaking figuratively there, saying he's looking for ASUU, because, I mean, we reach ASUU from time to time, almost at our fingertips. So I imagine it's figuratively, but that just brings a sense of what's working behind the scenes, and it gives a lot of people concern. I will not speak about how sad I am this morning, because it seems, I mean, this is something I've had to go through even while in school, before I got into school, even after. And I imagine for millions of people, either directly or indirectly, they're affected right now. But here's what we need to do, okay? ASUU is on strike. A lot of students are at home. I mean, imagine the challenges we're facing right now in the country. Inflation, fuel scarcity, insecurity. I mean, challenges about young people going into ritual killings and the rest. And we choose this moment to allow those students to go out of school. By the way, tertiary institutions insulate students in some way, teaches them integrity, a lot of things. This is not the time they should be out of school. We need to pay the revitalization funds. ASUU says they won't go back. So I think we should choose subsidy or ASUU. I mean, because we say we need to raise funds, right? If it makes sense, let's choose. Will we forego subsidy and say, let's invest this into the education sector? So we'll look at the education sector and say, this is an investment for the future. Because if government keeps saying we don't have money, we need to get that money. Gentlemen.
I look in the Constitution from time to time, guys.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah. And I do not have that precise place now. Mm-hmm. But there's a part of the Constitution that says, as soon as it is practicable, government should ensure free primary education, free secondary education, free university education, and free adult education programs. Even now, the ones that we are supposed to pay for is not available. So does it mean then that we should just forget about ever having, what do you call it, a free education? Or even education at all? That's the way it's coming out to me now. That's one. Secondly, for the life of me, maybe the spokespersons of the Minister of Education should come out and explain to us exactly what this means. Because part of the question 2 days ago that I remember we asked the ASUU VP that came was, look, in all of the conversations that we've been hearing from you, you've mentioned the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, you've mentioned finance, you've mentioned the Accountant General. In all of these, not even a single mention of the Federal Ministry of Education. I'm wondering, are you absolving the Ministry of Education of any role in all of these? And his response was, well, there is representation from time to time from the Ministry of Education, and here is the minister telling us he always attends the meeting except once when he was out of town to Germany. I'm at a loss as to what is happening now. I'm hoping that there is going to be some concession, some cohesion in all of this, thing, because it sounds like exactly what seriousness, what importance, what level of importance are we giving to young Nigerians? What level of importance are we even giving to the thing called education in our country? And for now, we are talking about academic education. How about vocational education? This, for me, is speaking volumes. And I think maybe there is something we are missing. We're just the press. We're always looking for answers. We're always asking questions. Maybe there are some things we are missing. Maybe, as Kayode said, it's figurative. I'm looking for the figure. I can see it. Not even on the face. There's something they call language, then there's something they call body language. This sounds to me like very emphatic. I am looking for ASUU. Mm-hmm. You are the ones that employed them, for God's sake. Even if they're on strike. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, gentlemen, in addition to that, because part of what Correspondent Gloria said there is that they also did ask him about the cut-off marks for federal government colleges. And he did say there's nothing that could be done about that it has to stay that way and nobody can do anything about it. But let's not forget that in 2014, a federal high court, which sat in Lagos, granted an order mandating the federal government to apply a uniform cutoff mark to all candidates seeking admission into federal government colleges, also known as unity schools, irrespective of their state of origin. Now, it turns out that the trial judge at the time, Justice John Soho, did declare unconstitutional the state-based admission irregularity in federal government colleges. That was because former president of the NBA, Mr. Olisa Abakwaba, SEN, he was the one who went to court about that. So in that suit, he was challenging the federal government and the Minister of Education that they do not prescribe different cutoff marks for different states based on candidates' gender, their state of origin. He argued that the same violates the candidates' fundamental rights to freedom from discrimination guaranteed by Section 42, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution. So he ruled that the minister, federal government, and the Minister of Education should apply uniform cutoff mark to all candidates seeking admission into federal government colleges, irrespective of their state of origin. How is it that the Minister of the Federal Republic, who swore to uphold the law, can say there's nothing that can be done about that?
The only question,
ruling about that.
The only question that I will ask to tail that, Chamberlain, would be, we have a system in place, or rather, we're supposed to have a system that is supposed to ensure that some things are done the way they ought to be done, irrespective of who is minister, which is the engine of government, which is the civil service. I am almost certain that the civil servants, career civil servants in the system, who have predated several ministers of education, are aware of this information. What happened? Who has kept the file somewhere and is not giving it life?
Are we allowed to pick and choose what laws we want to obey?
And how does this relate to federal character, really? So does it mean if, because of federal character, if there's a post available now, you will choose maybe master's level for a certain group of people from a particular place, but for others you give them HND to enter? Because I don't understand how federal character comes into play, into entry, into the cutoff marks and all that. So I don't quite understand. So I think you might need to shed more light on how federal character comes into play here.
Even if it's going to come into play, is it after the court has ruled that they carry out something, then you give it your own interpretation and say nothing can be done about that? What do we call contempt? What do we call, look, if a ruling is there, it's meant to be obeyed.
Well,
you
clearly,
can't pick and choose.
We've seen that we pick and choose. I mean, legal practitioners
Didn't the
have
government
said this.
come down on Lagos about that? Magodo said they needed to obey all those laws. I think the IGP or so, sending policemen there. So what about this one now?
And this is something that is futuristic. Gentlemen, we could go on and on about this, but maybe it's time for us to take a look at the papers now.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's begin with the leadership newspaper this morning, and hopefully it is cheering news coming from the NNPC. That's it right there. NNPC apologizes to Nigerians over bad fuel, long queues. Story is on page 4. Do I hear someone say apology accepted?
Or does that mean NNPC is responsible for the bad fuel?
Or at least taking responsibility. Okay. At least taking responsibility. It says, we didn't see it coming. Assures scarcity will disappear soon. Well, please define soon. PDP decries planned 201 billion naira for clearing adulterated petrol. Here we go again. We asked that question. How are they going to evacuate the bad fuel in the tanks? of these fuel stations.
And I thought that was said to have been done.
How in the universe is it going to happen and you're not going to mix bad fuel with good fuel?
I mean, the experts, I mean, this is what they do, really. So, I mean, and the messaging came out quite clear. It's been what? Is it quarantined? I think that was the term that was used, or isolated. And
Okay, I'm just... then the last writer says, Dangote Refinery, AFCFTA will boost Nigeria's economic recovery. That's ascribed to IMF. That's the lead story of the Leadership newspaper. And right under the nameplate, Emefiele's record causing panic attack. Friends tackle smear campaign. What does that mean, really? Well, the details you'll find on the inside pages of the paper this morning. And there's this one above the nameplate. 15 years after, Senate probes Obasanjo's 400 billion naira PHC projects. Does that sound like primary health care centers? I don't know. But the details, as we always say, is on page 6. That's the Leadership today.
okay, let's take a look at the, Vanguard newspaper for you this morning. Vanguard is next on our lineup, and take a look at what it says. NDLEA to police, drug cartel working with DCP Kyari, not our officers. You see, NDLEA Act, Kyari faces life jail. Well, and I'm highly disappointed with the situation. Okiro, former IGP. So page 14 is where you find the details of that one.
He used to be with the police council. And you know what former AIG of police, Austin Noah, said yesterday about the police council?
Oh, yeah.
They're supposed to be like the board that the police reports to. But because they don't function, they're almost like non-existent.
Who is the chairman of the board?
I think the point exactly.
And who are the members of the board?
The police council has been there for decades.
Oh,
If they've never been functioning, they're still not functioning. What are we still doing with
a
that?
constitutional body.
Okay.
well, there's a big picture on the front page, as you can see. People scrambling to get fuel. And under that, you see, bad fuel, queues will end next week. FG. So the question is this queue because of bad fuel or inadequate supply or something else? Because I mean, bad fuel, they said it was just some portion
Methanol,
and it was cleared. Yeah,
required stipulation.
Clearly, a lot needs to be answered about this one. A couple of other stories. 1 month warning strike. ASUU dodging negotiation. FG.
ASUU, why are you dodging negotiation?
Or ASUU, where are you? Since the Minister of Education
use
is
the King James language. Where art thou?
I wish the students can just laugh this morning.
What a world.
It's really sad. Page 8 has more details. Mr. and Mrs., they're not fighting this morning, by the way, so it's good to see amidst all the challenges. So you see Mr. telling Mrs. that, of course, Mark is football crazy. Did he discuss the game with you? And Mrs. said, sort of. I asked him how long he's been married. He said the marriage is approaching half-time, but he's looking forward to full and extra time, and that luckily there are 2 boys in the net.
Oh. And there will be no penalties?
Not yet. It depends on what happened during Valentine's.
But there are
If
2 boys in
there'll
the
be
net
penalties.
already.
Oh, thank God they've scrapped sudden death.
You know.
Sudden death rule.
That's the Vanguard for you this morning.
On to Daily Trust then. How top police brass tries to shield Kyari, Daily Trust reports this morning. And then, which is following up from what some of the dailies reported earlier. NDLEA tackles MPF again. IGP meets CJN. PSC dormant feels indiscipline in NPF. Member. Oh, member of what? Oh, of PSC.
Yeah. That's a Police Service Commission. Different from the council.
Mm-hmm. So you see, clearly so much to be said about that one. That's the big lead here today. That's Daily Trust this morning.
Nigerian News Direct has this one, completely different, I guess, from others. Deplorable correctional centers. Reps probe Aregbesola Nababa over 165 billion naira prison budget.
I thought he was campaigning.
Well, that's politics. This is governance.
Isn't politics the foundation of governance?
No. governance is about policies.
That's what politics is
Politics is
about
about elections.
No, politics is actually got it from policies. But
You're taking away from the
we're doing this morning, really? Because I think you know fully well what I mean.
Well, the story is on page 3. Expert suggests mechanism to checkmate corruption in Nigeria's security agencies. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with all of these guys.
Well, I mean, even that prison budget probe, well, yeah, not just the context is in the report, but, there'll be several questions. Maybe this might be their oversight. Because if you're probing the budget, you approved it in the first instance. So if it wasn't fit for purpose, they wouldn't have approved it. Unless maybe they approved it and they saw that they had reports.
Utilized well.
Yeah, and things were not going out the way it was. Or maybe they've gone to prisons and seen the food being given contrary to what was budgeted, and then they raise questions. So the reps are probing a number of things, so it'll be good to see the results of all of this probe by the end of the day. Hoping it makes requisite impact, as it were. Markwe, good morning.
Well, gentlemen, good morning. And I'm taking a look at The Guardian this morning. There are a few stories on the front page. This one has this. The young Nigerians defy CBN ban, gamble on risky crypto assets. That's what's on the front page of The Guardian. Adoption rate gains 10 percentage points in 1 year, says report. Scammers migrate to crypto P2P trading platforms. Buying, selling of stable coins gain traction. Non-enthusiasts, young professionals save stable coins in digital wallets. Asians, others feast. Desperate youths with trading bots. So you have all of that story on page 2 of the paper. Well, young Nigerians have found where to put their money, despite what the CBN says. They still believe that crypto might be the way. Federal government not to meet today, seek way out of fuel crisis. Page 2 will give you details. Kano demands freedom as court shifts ruling to April 8. And then they have this picture of, as if to press home the story on the headline. A pretty instructive picture. They're members of the Flutterwave team in Nigeria office. And they tell you the company is currently valued at over $3 billion after raising $250 million in a Series D round with more than 400 employees around the world, including Ghana, USA, Kenya, and South Africa. Flutterwave is the technology company enabling growth and creating endless possibilities for all. I mean, look at their faces. Really young people. And look at what they're doing already. Let's leave it there for The Guardian.
Other young people are not smiling this morning because of the ASUU strike, but let's take a look at Daily Times for you. You see the big story there is on PMS scarcity, or petrol as we know it. NNPC apologizes to Nigerians to inject 2.1 billion liters soon. And that question about when soon means, well, before the end of the month, I hear, says corporation working towards local refining. And there's this other one, FG orders MDAs to stop using Gmail, Yahoo Mail, others for official communication. Let's leave it there for the Daily Times.
Yahoo. Nigerian Tribune next. Adulterated fuel. NNPC files claims for damages against suppliers. That's the big one on the front page of the Tribune here today. So that's against suppliers. So who knows? Can there be class actions for what? Those whose cars might have been damaged? I don't know.
Is there any other alternative to that?
Is there any what?
Is there any other alternative to class action?
Good legal question. Okay.
Because I mean, if so people are so many, but the question then will be, how is it going to be done?
And the federal government says the plan will compensation for those whose cars might have been damaged.
Okay.
And then they want to spend how much to clean the fuel?
201 billion naira.
Rest my case. That's a look at some of the dailies here this morning. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away.
Is this really happening? Or there's a mix-up somewhere? Is perhaps the contemplation by some, and maybe a sit back and watch what this whole story of Abba Kyari being linked to a cocaine deal is all about. Well, whichever side of the coin it is for you, certain facts are currently incontrovertible. A once well-decorated police officer, branded in some quarters as a super cop, honored at several fora and many more for what he has come to be known for as that one police officer who has solved the puzzle of intriguing and difficult crimes, mostly around kidnapping and murder, has been arrested and in the custody of another anti-crime agency. We are talking about Deputy Commissioner of Police Abba Kyari. From the time he got enlisted into the Nigerian police force and got posted to Adamawa, later to Lagos, and up until joining the IGP Intelligence Response Team, IRT, it was an upward trajectory for him, almost a 22-year stainless service. Abba's troubles started in the last few months when the Federal Bureau of Investigation indicted him following allegations that he facilitated payments to Nigerian police personnel from Instagram celebrity Ramon Abbas, also known as Hush Puppy, which eventually led to his suspension from the Nigerian police and from his position as the head of Intelligence Response Team by the Police Service Commission in August 2021. For the rest of the year 2021 and January 2022, it did appear like nothing was going to happen as regards the extradition request to the US, and not much was heard or seen as an outcome of the investigation by a government institution. On a possible outcome of the investigation and prosecution of the Super Cop over his involvement with Hush Puppy, currently in a U.S. custody, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice had this to say.
So there's a possibility of extradition.
There could be a need or perhaps the possibility of making such requests, and looking.
Was there a request for extradition?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the parties are discussing, the parties are collaborating, and then there are exchange of correspondence from the perspectives of investigation, from the perspectives of extradition and associated things.
Is this new discovery a tee-off from the vagaries of extradition, or will a local prosecution utterly jettison his alleged exposure to Hush Puppy?
The Extradition Act is in existence, and it says clearly that once the person who is subject of the request for extradition is facing trial in the local jurisdiction, you cannot. He has to go through that process. So if Abba Kyari is charged to court by NDLEA or the Nigeria Police, that is the end of the extradition for now.
Many didn't see the latest event coming. First, NDLEA declared him wanted for attempting to siphon part of a cocaine haul, and just hours after that, he was arrested along with 4 other officers, Sunday Ubua, Bawa James, Simon Agrigba, and John Huhu.
We are not unaware of threats to the lives of NDLEA officers involved in this investigation, even as we continue to do our best to protect our officers and men in the line of duty.
Before his current travels, Abba Kyari was a well-decorated cop who had busted more than 80 criminal gangs and kidnappers, including the arrest of alleged Nigeria's most notorious kidnap kingpin, Chukwudimeme Onwamadike, also known as Evans. So what really happened? For now, his competencies are not in doubt. What is on trial is his character. The outcomes in the days ahead will definitely be an open book. Will competency match character? Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Well, that's the matter we're sinking our teeth into. We're still staying on this matter for you. And we have with us this morning Mr. Lanre Ikpemisho, who is a former Director General of the Nigeria Drug Law Enforcement Agency. You're welcome to Sunrise Relief this morning.
Good morning, viewers. Thank you for inviting me, Maokwe.
Well, every time a guest is able to make it to our studio these days, we're very grateful. I mean, considering what is happening with the fuel situation, I hope it wasn't too much of a headache for you to make it here.
It was, thank God we left early. We didn't know that there was going to be this bottleneck around the corner.
Yes.
It was quite hectic.
Indeed.
They're getting out of there. With all the siren, they couldn't be bothered.
Every time we have that, and I do not know why, it always seems that there's always disorganization around that particular area. We hope that the authorities will do something about it. But talking more about the story which broke, was it on Tuesday now, that it just came out of the blues, that, you know, this is the story that the NDLEA was going to brief the press about. It was quite revealing. How did the briefing of the NDLEA hit you as a former DG of the NDLEA?
Thank you very much, Mokwe, and thanks, Channel, for following up and encouraging us on this assignment. I've been with you for about 15 years, in and out, and you have been very consistent. When this news came up, incidentally, I have been former Director General, but now Special Advisor to the Chairman. So the initial reaction was that, so all those stories we've been hearing, they are really true? That this is antecedents? That was it, because we have no doubt about what we have seen. Prima facie case laid bare before us. And unfortunately, without even the decorum of somebody of that level, a Deputy Commissioner of Police, acting like a common criminal, was very painful. It was more of pain rather than being excited that you caught, you know, if you could have that at that level, how many more of such do I know that we have? That's the pain. So both on NDLEA side and the police side, it's a lot of pain for us. That's how, that's what is happening.
Well, the story of the NDLEA too was quite telling. I mean, the statement that they released, I mean, because for a number of people, it wasn't just about now. It was about what had been happening even before now. There were questions. I mean, the NDLEA, in his own statement, spoke of how there is a new sheriff in town, or since the new chairman came on board, this has ceased to be the situation. You know, I know that the new chairman has, you know, spoken a great deal about, you know, upping the morale of officers, trying to wield out bad eggs within the system, but generally protecting the men of the NDLEA from influences, from external influences, as much as possible. And it would seem that what he was trying to say is, what the statement was trying to say, that has already set in from when he started, you know, his work at the NDLEA. So this raises questions as to what could have been happening even before then. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, on this same program, I had said that drug and oil, wherever you put them, attracts criminals. Just like palm wine attracts flies. Wherever you put them. We're having an experience now at the ports where every day somebody wants to go and attack one container or the other, desperately, just because of tramadol. Anywhere you have drugs. So NDLEA is not a collection of angels. You recall that some time ago, with our international partners, we concluded that some 70 officers were no longer useful for the purpose they were engaged. And we disengaged them with the approval of the president. And we have peace. Because in collaboration with barons, seized drugs were becoming like semovita in between the airport and Shore Road. So we thought that that was not why NDLEA was created. and they were exited. So it sent a shockwave around the officers. In fact, some of them were so sure that they were not going anywhere. They went on.
When were these officers dismissed?
2009?
2009?
Yeah,
that was a long time ago.
70 of them. So what I was trying to draw out to you, Markwe, is that constantly, anywhere you have drugs, even if it is the Pope or Chief Imam or Sheikh that is in charge, try and lift the lantern for the coin you are looking for once in a while. That's how to do it. No assumptions. Drug corrupts. This oil corrupts. I don't know why, but I know that this is very consistent. So once in a while, we take our officers for necessary checks when it becomes necessary that they have to go into some certain sensitive areas. If, for instance, you are going to become an exhibit handler, we take you for necessary tests, we do a background check on you again, regardless of how many years you have spent in NDLEA. It has helped a lot. Now, to Marwa's administration and the magic that you are seeing. Number one, Marwa didn't just jump into NDLEA. He was chairman of PASEDA. And what he found shocked him. And as an administrator, himself, in his own right, he knew that this was not acceptable. On the part of governments, on the part of the officers, on the part of Nigerians. Somebody has to bring them to work together. Because if you think you have the level of drugs we have in our country, and you are safe because you and your small children, your small family, there's no drug in your house, you are wasting your time. If about 15 million Nigerians are on drugs, have taken drugs at one time or the other, but addicts are actually about 3 to 5 million. You cannot sustain that, Mokwe. You cannot sustain that. It means a lot. In the south, it's even worse. Lagos, about 33%. How are you going to handle that? It's chaos. Day to day, these things you are seeing will keep recurring. You have a lot of homeless who are on drugs. No. Homeless is not just, it's a lot of struggle to be on the streets. So to remain sane, you need something to encourage you. So that when they beat you, it doesn't matter. That's why when the police catch them, they beat them, it doesn't matter. I'll give you an instance. We had reasons to interview some of these boys being rehabilitated for banditry and all that. And the young boy said, we're not afraid of your armored tanks. We're not afraid of bullets. What we fear in the battlefield is lack of drugs in our pockets. Not that you don't have at all, but you envisage that this thing is running out. You already start panicking. So that tells you that the crimes, banditry, Boko Haram, all these crimes you are afraid of, kidnapping, at the bottom of it, which I've said about 15 years ago. If you're going to spend 3 billion, 30 billion to do kinetics, to fight these boys, why not just let's spend 10% of that and remove the drugs from everywhere? Task everybody. Task everybody. NDLEA be on the lead, but task everybody, remove this drug from this country.
Can you give us insights into how the cooperation went with the police? Because I do not know whether there was any cooperation with the police in being able to carry out the sting operation successfully. With the story, I think almost everybody has read the story by now, how, a drug a double crosser, it will seem, was trying to double cross his own team and became an informant to the police. And the police, they had an arrangement. The police was to, you know, swoop in on these people, arrest them. 25 kilograms was the amount of drugs involved. The police was to take 15, or the police officers involved were to take them in, let's say the police, because I think that is dragging the name of the entire police force in the mud. But the police officers involved, yes, were to take 15 kilograms of that, give 8 to take 8 and then give 7 to the people who were their informants, and they offered to sell 5 kilograms of the remaining 10 for NDLEA officers, and then give them the money in dollars, and that was the deal that was done. When this officer, the officer who came to report that this is the situation, or this is the...
But we thought he was working for the country. So everybody was happy that for the first time we're going to have this, you know, we already imagined an IG coming up. So we're disappointed, we're in pain, but then the law must be allowed to take its course so that the upcoming Abba Kyaris will know that no matter how long, how smart, the law will catch up with you. Please encourage NDLEA officers, rather than all the stories I hear, encourage them to come out. If he has evidence against them, let them meet in court. We are not going to tie his hand behind him and be slapping him. We don't do that. Let him go and prove his case before the courts. I'm very positive that this matter is good for Nigeria on all fronts, whether it's customs, whether it's NDLEA, whether it's police, army, general stealing money meant for soldiers who are in the war front. The boys are hungry. You are buying houses for girlfriends. No, we cannot continue like this. It has to stop. And luckily, you have a government that will not intervene in things like that. Say, oh, he's our boy. You will not hear that from this government. He will go all alone down if he's found guilty.
I'll be honest with you. I imagined that this interview was just going to be, you know, straightforward, but this has been way emotional than I expected, even personally, and it's just been a roller coaster. But, you know, speaking of, you know, courts, what is next? I remember Mr. Babafemi saying that the NDLEA will not detain him beyond, you know, the normal time. And, I mean, according to law, it's meant to be between 24 and 48 hours. And then, I mean, court proceedings are meant to take place, except you have a previous court order. So what's the thinking? Is it still being detained? Has it been released on bail? Or do you have a court order to that effect?
When you have a matter like this, you're like, this your time that you are spending on this matter wasn't part of your calculation last week. Yet you are here discussing this, which means some other matters have to give way because of the importance to this country. So you are making a sacrifice as a TV station because of national interest. If he has to spend 2 or 3 Mondays for this case to be clear, when nobody gave Saddam Hussein that kind of luxury of 24 hours. You remember that? Nobody plays with cases of this magnitude on the platter of all these fancy talks of... nobody does that. No country will do that. Please, let us honor this country. You know that criminals are smart. Let us stop backing them up with what they don't deserve. Let his lawyers go to court and ask for bail. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Commissioner, we'll go to break, but we'll come back and continue on this conversation in just a moment. We'll be right back.
Well, you're welcome back. Let's continue our conversation with the former DG of the NDLEA, Mr. Ikpemasho. He joins us from our Abuja studio. And I mean, you said that this is a very peculiar case. So what happens with other cases in terms of, what is it, 24 hours or 48 hours limit does not apply to this one because of the magnitude. In fact, you referenced the Saddam Hussein case. But I'd like to also understand this. I mean, he was declared wanted by the NDLEA on Monday, and the police in the statement that was released afterwards said that, well, they had gotten some pieces of information, that's what the police said, on February the 10th from the NDLEA. So clearly there was some form of communication. So why declare him wanted when the police said they had gotten that information from you, the NDLEA in this case, and they were working on it? So why did the NDLEA have to now come out and say, you know what, this man is wanted? Okay, I don't think you got that. Let me just take that again.
Okay.
Oh, you can hear me now. Okay, I'm not sure where you got it up to, but let me just take it all over again. So I was talking about the
no, you wanted to know. You wanted to know that.
Please go on.
Why the NDLEA declared him wanted, even though the police was already in the know and was already working behind the scenes.
Thank you. Can I go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. You know, at the level of the IG and the chairman of NDLEA, there was a correspondence and that is what the law requires. If there is an infraction by an officer in any of the MDAs or police or parastatal or paramilitary, you write to the head of the agency and say that we have something against your officer. Please release him to us. That procedure was followed. He was supposed to show up at a given time. He didn't show up. And efforts to reach the authorities to say that we haven't seen him did not yield much. And this is not a matter in which we want to hear that he had gone through Cotonou, he had gone through this and disappeared. So a timeline was set, and when he wouldn't come up within the timeline, he was declared wanted. Apart from that, we have unprecedented cooperation with the police authorities, who also have the responsibility to check the information passed to them. You know, he's a senior officer that has got so much commendations apart from the recent developments of his investigation. So you can't just throw him up. We have to do our own. And they stated it in their reply that we have done our own findings. Of course, part of his defense was that, no, I didn't do it alone. We expect that. Any criminal you get will look for somebody to join him. It's not easy to go down alone. So he was declared wanted because there was a timeline, and it was already in breach of the timeline. And I'm happy that the declaration has yielded this result for Nigerians.
You know, yesterday we had...
We're going beyond that now.
All right, because, I mean, some lawyers say that, yes, that the NDLEA has the powers to...
offering that had been made to him. I do not know at what level he filed that report, but how was that received at the NDLEA?
Thank you, Maupe. You know, I'm a lawyer, I'm an investigator, I'm a prosecutor. So these are areas that I will just mess up our country if I go into now. Because you just have created an avenue for criminals to just slip off your hands And that is what they always wait for. They know that we make fundamental mistakes through which they will escape. Their lawyers, everybody is waiting now for me to make that mistake of discussing this area. So you will, in the name of our nation, and the need for us to all work together to clean this country, allow the investigations to continue. They have been making statements, they've been going up and down, blowing hot and cold. But I'm happy with the consistency of the police authorities. That we don't groom criminals. We're not saying that we don't have criminals.
Did you receive the cooperation? Did the NDLEA receive
yes.
the cooperation of the police
very well.
in this regard?
Oh, very well. We received the cooperation of the police, who came out to say that this guy, in the first place, you are on suspension. So how would all this operation without approval of the relevant authorities? Why are you so important that in suspension? You went and carried out operations without, you know, it's very strange, isn't it? With a retinue of operatives all the way to Enugu. No, I think he has, he's taken too much for granted because he's been getting away with too much. And this one, unfortunately, is gone beyond bounds. And he will soon find out that all those officers he relied upon to blackmail them, everybody will back out.
The statement, you know, so after the NDLEA released its first statement at that press briefing, the police released another statement. The police did say that the officers who were, beg your pardon, the people who, let me rephrase this now. The suspects, the drug cartel which came from Ethiopia had already gone through clearance, that they had NDLEA officials on their payroll. And that was what the statement of the police said. I don't know if you heard, if you saw that part in their statement, that there were NDLEA officials on their payroll. And I think it's worthy of note that the suspect, the drug suspect or the drug cartel had already left the airport before the IRT team swooped in on them. So there are still questions as to, you know, how did 25 kilograms go through our airport system undetected? How did that happen?
Without breaking the principles that I laid down earlier of allowing the investigators to do their work, these things are not strange to me. That an NDLEA officer will sit down and watch 50 kilograms be going, and somebody will even tap him and say, "Can't you see that?" He say, "It's allowed all over the world." Let the investigators complete their work. We've said it before, a whole container left Apapa was already in Igamu before we struck. We know why we do that. We have international collaborators with whom we have agreed that it's not enough to catch this container. It's more important to get who is behind it. And it's been better for us all. You know, these things are not strange.
So the NDLEA...
What they don't know is that it's not as easy as that for you to just watch 20 kg. No, anywhere in the world, anywhere you see it, run away from it. Even if it's in open field. The world is looking at it, and they will soon get you'll soon find out that it's not just lying there on its own. The NDLEA officers were asked to play along. The pictures that were sent were not sent to NDLEA officers. They were sent to him, and he walked in, and the law is taking its toll. They've gone front and back. They've done all sorts of things. You know, the first was to say that in order to have our officers work with him, that if I don't work with you now, my bosses will be mounting pressure on me so that I will dispose and quickly give them the money. I don't believe all that. Because where will you alone have amassed the kind of wealth he was talking about if it is just taking errand to your bosses? But you know, you don't want to account to the police bosses, you don't want to account to the NDLEA, so that if they say this, you say this amount is going this. If NDLEA says this, we asked these officers play along. That is how it is done. That's how. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
And if he has his evidence that it was at the instance of NDLEA officers, we have nobody at all. Nobody at all under the management that we have will be protected. Nobody, Maokwe. We all have gone through this thing enough. You cry every day because of parents who come thinking that you can help them get their children off drugs. They'll come and cry, and you see a whole home that you hear big names, that you hear, comfortable in life, collapsing on their head like this, and you look at them, you cannot help. What can you do? This is the little area that government has given to me to help Nigeria. Nobody, no compromise on this.
Let's flip this to Lagos. I understand my colleagues have questions.
Yeah, how, for instance, there are also narratives that there was a group that tried to double-cross those who had smuggled it. So is that the case? Do we also, or does the NDLEA have a tab on the original smugglers themselves as well as those who try to double-cross?
Chamberlain, quite a long time. Happy to see you again on this matter. Thanks for being consistent, like I said to Malcolm. These are matters that interest the investigators. They are probing all these questions that are coming onto the table. What cannot be denied is that he had his direct contact with the importers, and he thought that he needed collaborators from NDLEA. His cooperation had been sought before when they thought he was sincere. Now he thought after several months that, okay, why not? Let me get back to these guys and see if we could work together. Let me leave it at that, Chamberlain. Let's not
we understand
this,
that
case.
Right. So how deep is this? Because, there were many who would think that Abba Kyari, would have been the last person they would think can be involved in this kind of matter. Is this a systemic thing? How deep is this, for instance?
Chamberlain, you see, your natural self, this is not the way you speak. So you are also going through some pain like everybody. A young guy that we're thinking that this is IG in the next, less than the next how many years to come. Even me, I went emotional. Because I really thought he was sincere. But about 3 years ago, a very senior investigator in SSS drew my attention to something that looked like acting and all that, and camera and all that, it's very strange. So we are not so excited that we caught somebody, a suspect of his. We are worried that see how much Nigeria had invested in this guy. See opportunities that he has had. He's like a special corps, very special, being envied even by some of his colleagues. So for him to come crashing like this out of avarice and greed is so painful. Not many police officers wake up every day, they are going to work, and they enjoy what they are doing like Abba. Standing ovation at National Assembly. Who is he?
Prosecute him, given the positions decided from the points of law. But then they also think that for him to be fully tried, to go the whole hog, that the police has got to derobe him, and then he'll be tried as a regular Nigerian, not just being on suspension, and then being tried as a suspended police officer. Could you shed some light on that, hoping it won't jeopardize anything?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. You see, there's nothing we're doing here that is that has not happened before. I remember I told you about the DEA official that held Noriega. You remember? He collected $2 million. He has been prosecuted in 7 terms. So there's nothing we're doing here that are not in the books or that we're just starting. As we speak now, police will not stop its own processes or procedures against him just because NDLEA is doing this. No, he has to account to the police on whether he still deserves to wear the uniform or not. NDLEA is saying that the drugs and what you are doing cannot combine. So at the appropriate time, even if it is not done, NDLEA will write to remind them that a prima facie case has been laid against this officer. And the fear of, anything can happen in Nigeria may affect people who will want to come and give evidence. They say, we don't know how they will go and settle it, then they will use your head to break coconut and all that. In fairness to all concerned, there is a need for him to come and answer his case as Abba Kyari, not as DCP. Thank you.
Well, for me, it's a number of issues that you have thrown up, most certainly. When we began to hear the back and forth between the police and the NDLEA, one of the questions that came to my mind was, here it seems like here we go again. Each agency of government protecting itself, as opposed to protecting the system, so to speak. Is there an end in sight for you to this interagency, should I call it bickering or rivalry? Because both agencies are security agencies of government. So a time when this agency wants to defend itself, when it's a clear case of this that has happened, just as you have said, painful as it is there an end in sight to a time when agencies defend themselves as opposed to taking responsibility for whatever it is that's on their side? Because it would seem NDLEA is defending itself and police is doing the same.
Thank you very much. This is a classical case where you will see that at a certain point, we stand for our countries, not for our agencies. There must be a Nigeria before there is Nigerian police. And the IG has demonstrated that. The chairman NDLEA has demonstrated that. The chairman NDLEA has said, if you have your evidence against any of the officers, apart from the area that they were allowed to play along, bring it. The officer will be prosecuted along with his collaborators, if any. And again, like I said earlier, police has demonstrated enough goodwill, good faith, by saying that our officer was on suspension. If he had to go on this type of assignments, even at his level, he ought to have taken the authorities into confidence and will now decide whether the matter was so peculiar that only you could have gone. How many DCPs do they have in the police that they will now sacrifice the entire police for him? Unless, of course, like the top 2 blackmail in the first reaction that, this morning now, this portion must go to my bosses. It's all blackmail. And even those who mistakenly thought that, NDLEA, why did they rush to this, dog no eat dog and all that, they withdrew such statements when they saw the magnitude of the damage. It's not about protection of agencies now, it's about protecting our country. Okay. Your agency will not exist if this country is brought down. What agency now will go to these areas in Katsina that are being affected by it? What agency? Everybody ran away, and only the people. the poor people. So I think we should let these institutions work. And if the people who are there will not allow it to work for Nigeria, get people who will allow the institutions to work for the sake of everybody.
Okay.
Not standing because of 4-year term. After 4 years, what remains? Nigeria is worse off for it. No. We have responsible people in authority now who wants their name written on the side of Nigeria. I want you to take this from me. I'm not a PR person. It's because I know that the drug situation has gotten to a point where nobody is spared. Forget about the names we call ourselves, big names. Forget about governor, forget about ministers. Drug enter these houses. These huge fences, they don't stop drugs from entering. See how many women, 1 in every 4 women you see on drugs. Where is the engine room of a family? Each family makes a country. So if in the engine room of 1 of every 4 is in trouble, we are in trouble. Drugs is not something that you play around with, particularly with the level of illegal weapons in our country. And money in wrong hands. Some people didn't sweat for anything, just money landing on his table and can control unemployed. No. We don't have too much time for this kind of ceremony. If somebody is sitting in the position of chairman NDLEA or IGP and he thinks defending that seat is more important than defending our country, then he should leave and let our country move on.
Okay. Well, there's something else that you said earlier that's very, very interesting. And when you talked about, allowing, some of these consignments to go and all of that just because you want to know the source. Is that standard practice all the time? Because one of the questions a number of people may want to ask is, what then is the job of organizations, security agencies such as the NCS, Customs Service, to ensure that those things don't even come into the country in the first place? So allowing them to go into the system, there's a risk of them getting lost in the way. So I'm wondering, should they even be allowed in the first place? How do they slip through the borders, through the entry points into the country and do the kind of havocs, wreak the kind of havocs that you've been talking about?
Thank you. You will recall that we got this huge seizure from 420 kg from Chile some time ago in wood furniture. This was the process. There are over 25 million people working for the chairman of NDLEA all over the world. That some of them may not even know that they are working for him. They just do their work naturally. Then at a point they discover that, oh, it's heading for Nigeria. Then they put Nigeria on alert. They are, yes, this had happened before with this group. We want to know what is happening. Where do they take it to? So that we can neutralize the group. So there's an understanding when that happens. The top echelon of relevant agencies are put in the know. Customs is aware at the level of need to know. NDLEA is aware at the level of need to know. So they just allow the idiot who says he's a big baron to fool himself all through.
But let me quickly read this portion of the police report. They say that the 2 arrested drug couriers, this was the initial report, the 2 arrested drug couriers also confirmed, this relationship with the NDLEA officers at the Akano Ibiam International Airport since 2021 and had in this instant case of 19th January 2022 been identified and cleared by the NDLEA officers as customary, having received their pre-departure photographs. This is the police report, the police press statement talking about the 2 drug couriers who came in through Akano Ibiam International Airport. They say the 2 arrested drug couriers confirmed that the modus is for the transnational drug barons to conspire with the NDLEA officers on duty and send them their pre-boarding photographs for identification, seamless clearance, and unhindered passage out of the airport with the narcotics being trafficked. The 2 arrested drug couriers confirmed that they had been enjoying this relationship with the NDLEA officers at the Akano Ibiam International Airport since 2021 and had in this instant case of 19 January 2022 been identified and cleared by the NDLEA officers as customary. I know that the NDLEA, debunked that yesterday in their own statement as well, saying that they never got in touch with their officers. But do we have the assurance of the NDLEA that there will also be another investigation in-house, assuming there had been stones unturned?
That's where we are. I call upon Nigerians who are aware of such transaction or relationship, send in your memorandum and just keep quiet and be watching. Why all this talk? Send in your petition and say that enough of this destruction of this country by you guys pretending to be working for us. Please handle this. Send in your petitions. And you see that there's no sacred cow. No sacred cow. That's why we're waiting. The moment you arrest somebody like this, you expect things to be thrown up, to shock so that, officers are afraid of coming up. No. Bring evidence that apart from, Mr. Chairman, apart from the story of you asking them to play along, did you also ask them to play along? This is the storyline of the earlier transactions. Period. You just wait and watch. So this one that you asked me to be narrating here, is of no essence. Ask those who know, who are aware, and they love this country, and they love their family, they love their children. Bring the right documents.
I find the statement of the police very, of the NDLEA, the allegations that they have filed now against Mr. Kyari are very strong. They say that it's not just that he breached his position of authority. They say they suspect he's a member of a drug cartel. For me, for you to reach that sort of conclusion, it cannot just be this one incident.
Well,
it could mean that there are several.
Let me ask you, if I give you 5 kg of cocaine, as expensive, as valuable as the money is now, what will you do with it? You just be looking at me, whether I'm mad. What do I do with it? You won't know where to face with it. I can beat my chest about that. So for somebody to tell us that we'll sell, and he was indeed able to sell, he needs to tell us more now.
As to whom he sold it to.
He needs to help us as a country. He needs, on all fronts, on supply, on demand, he needs to help us.
Well, we certainly will look forward to how this case eventually progresses, and I know that a lot of people are still going to be keeping their eyes on this matter. We can only say that we wish the NDLEA many more successes. I know that, you're indeed very pained this morning about, this particular issue and the caliber of people, the caliber of persons who have been found out in this instance. Well, we certainly will keep our tabs on it. We have to thank you so much for making the sacrifice to be here this morning. Mr. Larry Ikpin-Michaud is the former Director General of the NDLEA. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, Nigerians, for your patience.
We'll take a break at this point and we're back to look at another matter. Please stay with us. So we are turning our attention to another issue which concerns electricity. Right now, we're currently grappling with an energy crisis. There have been outages in many parts of the country owing to is it failure of transmission or failure of generation? But I do know that a few of the discos have been sending messages to their customers as to what could be responsible for the outages that they have been experiencing. And we all know that there is a fuel shortage in the country. Normally, when there is an outage of electricity, many people turn to their generators. And for many homes, they're powered by petrol, which is currently very scarce to come by, or it's still a problem in the country, even though I think that problem should be easing sometime soon. But what other alternatives are there? The federal government did come up with an idea for rural areas under the Rural Electrification Scheme, and there is an entire agency for that, and there is a fund underneath that agency to look after that particular issue. We're speaking this morning with Dr. Sanusi Mohammed Ohiari, who is the Executive Director, Rural Electrification Fund under the Rural Electrification Agency. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Glad to be here.
Well, the mandate of the Rural Electrification Agency seems to be the mission, or the mandate. Let me start with the mandate now. Is to promote rural electrification in the country, coordinate rural electrification programs in the country, and administer the Rural Electrification Fund, which you head. So can you give us a scope? Can you tell us just how bad the problem was before the Rural Electrification Agency came on board, and how far they've gone, you know, with trying to get rural communities to have electricity?
Thank you very much, Maupe. As you know, the Rural Electrification Agency was created in 2005 out of the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, as the Rural Electrification Fund as well was created at the same time. And at that time, the government was moving away from funding rural electrification, the power sector, 100%. It was a vertically integrated system. The model was for government to spend on everything: generation, transmission, distribution, and rural electrification. For lack of, inadequate, funding, the government thought it wise to, sell off, some components of the sector, and then retain rural electrification because, of course, it was not very viable to private players, and they were not interested at the time. So, but government still needed to look for a way to fund and take care of those people in rural communities. So, when the agency came on board, the mandate was to look at, underserved and unserved areas, and the figure we have from, say, around 6-7 years ago was that about 83 million Nigerians did not have access to electricity. But this figure, I must qualify, it's based on secondary data that was available, but it gave us a sense of where to look in terms of those that didn't have access to electricity. And out of this figure, we're looking at connecting 51 million Nigerians through the grid. So if you take like a 10-20 kilometer buffer around where the grid lines stop, would imagine that the grid would extend to those areas and cover those areas. So outside these areas, we still had about 32 million Nigerians, which for us is our core area that we needed to focus on. And we needed to come up with quickly with programs and plans on how to electrify these rural communities. That's why you've been hearing a lot about solar, mini grids, solar home systems, and even recently we went into a program that seeks to bring more innovative ways outside solar, renewable energy, technologies, to help power rural communities.
You're focused largely on renewables.
Yes.
And for some people, they think that since I don't want to say your mandate is now renewables, because it was seen that as a result of focusing on areas that are hard to reach or that will not be able to get connected to the grid, those were the solutions that could easily come up.
Yes.
You could easily come up with. But looking at the problems that we currently have, even with those connected to the grids, there have been questions as to whether those solutions are not applicable to even certain areas that are normally on the grid, but perhaps would also need special considerations yes. For renewables, so to speak. Yes. Have you had to go outside the mandate of core rural areas to also reach those kinds of places?
You're right, Maupe. In fact, we are considering, changing the name of the agency to add renewable. So maybe Rural Renewable Energy Agency, just to, take care of.
That's how quickly.
Yes, it has gotten to that level, and we're currently with the National Assembly. They are reviewing the act, and it's one of the proposals before them. Hopefully, they consider it. Now, talking about areas within grid-connected areas, that's still, we call them underserved. So they are within the grid-connected areas, but they still don't get enough power and energy. So yes, we do intervene in those areas as well. As a matter of fact, if I leave your studio now, we are going to, for a signing ceremony for a program, one of our programs funded by the EU and German government, where we are focusing on interconnected mini-grids. So interconnected means there is already some power coming from the grid, but not stable. It's epileptic. So we are now applying the solutions that we usually apply to completely isolated areas to those communities. So it involves partnerships with the DISCO, other agencies that certify the grid like NEMSA, and also the Ministry of Power and the likes. So yes, we do intervene. As a matter of fact, our capital project, which was the only source of providing electricity before we came, still focuses on providing transformers, extending the grid to areas that need special intervention, which we still do till date. But what's interesting is that since 2017, when we came on board, we've been able to attract more funding for off-grid technologies and projects and programs away from the capital projects. So we still have capital projects, but we have lots of programs now and funding coming in, for off-grid.
Okay, so can you give us what the impact has been for the rural communities? I imagine that this is not just electricity for electricity's sake.
Exactly.
For the communities that you have been able, so far so good, can you give us a rough idea of how many communities you have been able to impact and how many people as a result of that first?
Okay, so let me answer the question in two folds. So for purely household connections, from new programs, away from capital projects like I mentioned, we've been able to do over 400,000 households. And when you multiply this by number of people per household in Nigeria, you're looking at, say, 5 people per household. Maybe 2.5 million people have been impacted for just households. For businesses, small and medium enterprises, we've done over 3,000 small and medium enterprises that have been impacted by some of these programs. And in terms of job numbers as well, we've done over 5,000. In terms of job numbers from all of our programs. But then this does not include programs that, for instance, energizing education, because we didn't know how to, calculate number of, students as households. So we have 37 universities that we're looking at. We're providing electricity. We've done, in the first phase 9, we've done 7 out of the 9. And this is impacting hundreds of thousands of students and lecturers and, medical students and all of those within the university, which also has training facilities for renewables for those students in those universities. So that's another layer, of impact. And for in terms of the number of people, like I mentioned earlier, over 2.5 million people have been impacted so far. 2.5
million people
yes.
have been impacted so far. And, I wasn't quite sure, but I knew that universities had come under the areas, I don't know whether you categorize them as underserved, but I know they had come under some special consideration
exactly.
for renewables
yes.
as well. And
yes.
I know that the Rural Electrification Agency was involved in that.
Yes.
So you say how many universities in all?
So we're doing 37 universities, but we're taking them in phases. The first phase, we've done 7. And the second phase we'll do 7. We'll do 7. First phase 7 out of 9. Second phase we are doing 7, and then like that. So this university, like you said, is a special intervention program from the president, handed down through the ministry to Rural Electrification Agency to intervene in. So even if they are not largely in rural communities, because of the special importance and attachment the president has for students and young people, he felt that this was one of the ways to reach out and impact, their lives. And we're not just doing, universities as well. With COVID, we had to also intervene in health sector. We did some primary health centers. Some are still ongoing. I think we've completed 200. And then the World Bank is also funding about 50 isolation centers and general hospitals. And we're also going to do another 400 primary health centers, going into this year or next year. So, because power is very important and is important across every sector. So we tend to have a lot of special interventions that we need to intervene in. But what's important and what we need to keep in mind is we have also designed programs that are focusing mainly on those in rural communities, which has, helped them to generate incomes, help their socioeconomics in the rural communities. And we are not just focusing on electrons going into the households. We ensure that for every household in that community, we are looking at productive uses, we are looking at MSMEs, how does it transform their lives so that they can stay there comfortably and they are happy. And I may have to mention this. For those programs, especially for the mini-grids, these people have 24 hours electricity and they enjoy this all year round. So they even have power more than some of us in the cities that are currently grappling with, like you had said in your introduction, lack of stable power.
Well, let's take a break at this point. We'll be back to continue this conversation. Please stay with us. We're still with Dr. Sanusi Mohammed Ohiari, who is Executive Director, Rural Electrification Fund under the Rural Electrification Agency. We'll now flip the conversation to Lagos, where my colleagues have questions coming from.
Well, thanks a lot, Mark. Dr. Ohiari, electricity is a very, very important topic in Nigeria. If it's not fuel scarcity, it is inadequate power supply. And I don't know if you can hear me. Okay.
Yes,
so,
I can hear you.
All right. So it's either fuel scarcity, which we're experiencing now, or inadequate electricity supply. And those are really touchy, topics. And it's all the more touchy because a lot of things are very vague in that sector. The more you see, the less you know, as it were. But break this down for us, because you are in a very interesting sector, the rural areas. So the urban people who complain a lot might not need to direct their questions at you, but the rural people are important as well. And looking at that document, the Rural Electrification Strategy Implementation Document, which was put out a couple of years back, you try to break down the statistics. And I'd like to know how far you have gone in meeting some of the targets that was set. So imagine that more than 70 million Nigerians lack access, to quality or reliable electricity supply, and majority, in fact, more than half of the population are rural dwellers. And that target was to meet the target in some sense. I think about, 75% of that by 2020. That was the target in that document. How far have you been able to meet the target, seeing that we're in 2022 already? Have you been able to do that 75%?
Thank you very much, Kyari. Very interesting question. So in terms of the target from RECIP, the targets were based on, certain amounts of money being provided. So the target was for the agency to provide 1.1 million connections every year through to 2030. 2030 is the year we are hoping to at least do 90%. But, in the absence of having the kind of funding that we need, we have not been able to meet this target, and that's the honest truth. But we've been able to look for other sources of funding, like I had mentioned, from World Bank, from African Development Bank. And with what we have, we are doing our bit. And that's where all of these programs that you hear about and all of these connections that we've made that has impacted about 2.5 million people is coming from. So these monies were supposed to be provided through the Rural Electrification Fund, and the sources of funding for the Rural Electrification Fund has not been very consistent, and it has not been strengthened. So this is something that we're also discussing with the National Assembly and the government in view of the review currently going on, so that we can have sustainable funding, because the World Banks and the African Development Banks and the EUs and the likes will not continue to give provide money all the time. So this is where we are.
So in essence, if it's 2.5 million, you're still struggling to hit 5% of that target, 70 million by 2020 or thereabout. So clearly we have a...
So don't take the 70 million as what the Rural Electrification Agency alone is supposed to provide electricity, or the number that we are supposed to meet. Out of that 70, or I think it was even 80 million, 51 million were supposed to be connected by the grid. So if you look at the off-grid, the balance, which is about maybe 32 million, about 26 million were supposed to be provided through mini-grids. So the target was to do at least 1,000 mini-grids before 2030. And the rest, which is about 700 and something, were supposed to be provided through solar home systems. So this is the breakdown. So if you say, it may be a bit misleading if you say the entire 70 or 80 million we are supposed to provide electricity to them, because the idea is that the grid will continue to grow and we take care of the most vulnerable unserved people, which is around 32 million, like I mentioned.
Right. So the point here is to try to get the right figure, and I'm glad you have broken it down further. So if the target is 30 million or thereabouts, and you've done 2.5, that's less than 10% of 30 million or 32 million. So, you know, it just helps us understand what we need to cover. But you talked about funding, and if there's anything that has been a challenge, it will be funding over time. What kind of fund, just how much funds did you need for that period of time, and what was the challenge? How couldn't you get those funds? Because those projections were made based on, you know, the realities or your personal, you know, projections. I thought, okay, it will be easy to get this fund. So how much did you need, and why was it difficult to get the funds?
So from our analysis, would need about $2.5 billion. And we've only just raised, from every source that we have, about $590 million.
So why was it difficult to raise the funds? Because, again, you made the projections based on, I mean, the current reality. You thought it would be easy to raise this fund. So you said, you know what, by 2020, we should do 75%, 25, 90%. So why was it difficult to meet your target?
Okay, so it was a bit difficult because although the Rural Electrification Fund was created in 2005, but it didn't start operations until 2017 when we came on board. It was only when we came on board we operationalized it, and at the time it was only the seed fund that was available, which was less than, which was about $4 million that was there. And from that $4 million, the agency has been able to attract up to 590 from other sources outside government, right? So the capital project yearly budget is still there, but that's doing more of transformers and streetlights and the likes. So it was difficult because it took us 12 years later, you know, to start. And like other funds, you know, like TED Fund, the Ecological Fund and the likes, the states categorically where these funds should come from and what percentage should go where, right? Ours needs to rely on, for instance, the regulator, Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, who is yet to determine that particular rate that should be coming to the fund. However, they've been supportive in other sources that concerns them, like, you know, remitting the yearly surplus, you know, to the fund, and also all of the fines, from eligible customers and licenses that comes to the fund, which is negligible in terms of the amount if you compare it to the scale of the problem. Now, another challenge that we've had is that with Finance Act coming on board, there's been a back and forth in terms of whether these monies that NERC should remit to us should first go to consolidated revenue or whether this money should come directly to the fund. The National Assembly had intervened and said, oh, the act is clear because of the importance of rural education, this fund should come directly. But then we keep getting letters, from Auditor General, Ministry, Finance, all of these people sending another signal to NERC not to send this money. So all of this back and forth, I don't think augurs well for the plans that we have. And until maybe the act is reviewed, which is currently under review, and the sources of funding for REF is strengthened, we'll continue having this back and forth. And to be honest, it's a bit disappointing because, rural education power is very important, especially to rural people. In fact, it should be something that should be like an emergency that the government needs to, consider. But unless we all come together and agree that this is an emergency, and we need to tackle it as an emergency. If we keep having all of these back and forths amongst government agencies, then we'll continue to have this problem. But we are also very happy with, some of the support we've gotten from the president. So far, all of the programs, the Solar Nigeria, 140 billion for loans and all of that is as a result of some of the complaints we made and, looking for solutions to them. So, but we are hoping, because the most sustainable one, all of these are stopgap, ad hoc, if you like, measures, to funding. But the most sustainable would be strengthening the fund and just knowing how to plan based on what you're expecting. Like the TED funds and the likes, they know what is coming in. They work with the FIRS, and once the money comes in or before it comes in, they can plan for what they want to do. So unless we have reach that level where we are able to plan properly based on what is coming in, then we'll still struggle. But in the meantime, we are not sitting down. We are still reaching out to financiers, having discussions every day to get more funding, to carry on with our programs.
Well, my question was actually along the line of the sustainability that you just referenced now. I mean, part of what the Rural Electrification Fund is about is to provide this supply in a way that would allow for reasonable return on investment through what is called appropriate tariff that is economically responsive and supportive of the average rural consumer. So I'm wondering right now, how is that to be operationalized? Because just as you said, it is one thing to raise these funds, unsustainable, just as you were saying. Part of the reasons for the Rural Electrification Fund is to provide part that can be, that's affordable for the people that you are providing it for. So if it's, maybe that raises the question of whether or not it's a social program or a commercially viable program.
So the idea is to use the funds that we have to support and incentivize private players to come in. And the idea is also not to use the funds for subsidies, consumption subsidies, but rather use it to support infrastructural development as a way of capital grants and subsidies. So, if we have a total cost of, say, 10 naira, to put up a mini grid somewhere, the fund looks at it, does its evaluation, and look at the need to bring in these capital grants and how it affects the tariff in the rural community. And then we provide this to the developer, who then goes to put the project on the ground, and it will be in charge of operating and maintaining it over its life cycle of, say, 20 years. So for that 20 years, the agreement would be that there will be 24 hours electricity in that community. If there's any problem, the developer will take care of it. And of course, this goes into the tariff, that they will charge as well. So this is the model that we currently run.
Right now of this template, this model that you talked about?
Say that again?
Is there any operator now operating this model that you just described?
Yes. We have so many of them. In fact, in the very first call that we did in 2018 with the seed money that we met, we were able to get about 12 mini-grid developers that provided electricity to over 5,000 households. And then we also did about 19,000+ solar home systems to various communities. In the second call, we are doing 51 mini-grids that will provide electricity to over 19,000 households as well. And then the NEP, which is also another program, under the REA, is also providing electricity to various communities. In fact, as we speak, they have over 40 mini-grids that have been completed and awaiting commissioning. So yes, for the very first time since we came on board, players, developers have benefited. I mean, some of our commissioning is, they are all over the media. These people are enjoying electricity. We go on regular checks, monitoring and evaluation to see that, the systems are still in place and working. And we're happy, to report that, they've been working so far. The developers are happy, the rural people are happy. REA is happy with, the services and, this model that is being provided so far.
And what's the return on investment so far from these players that have made the investments?
I wouldn't know. Maybe you'd have to bring in one of them.
No, I asked that because you talked about sustainability of the project, and if it's going to be private sector driven, it most certainly has to be commercially viable for them.
It is viable, and of course, they are bringing in their own money as well. So what we are giving is just part grants. So they are also talking to commercial banks, even trying to get international investors to invest in this project. So for them to bring in their money, of course, they would have done, the maths, and it's viable for them. We've not had any complaints that it's not viable. We've had complaints about trying to scale up, trying to raise more funding so that they can participate in more of the programs. We've had complaints about Forex and how it affects, their businesses. We've had complaints about, customs and how it affects bringing in some of their products. But we haven't really had complaint about them, being viable or not. Because before they even go into investing, they bring proposals based on viability, and we see what the gap is and how we can, fill it in. So yeah, that's where we are.
So many questions running through my head now, but I just wanted to find out, is there a gradation, a grading of the rural areas in the rural areas? I ask that because, there are, you talked about micro, small, and medium enterprises in these rural areas. Some of these, businesses are, they're in farmlands. They're in the deep farmlands and all. So I'm wondering if there is such grading in these rural areas, because there are rural areas and there are rural areas. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying, Ayo. And yes, there are gradings in terms of population and how dispersed they are. So for instance, if you look at a cluster of, say, 400, 500 households that is largely rural, spanning a few kilometers and far away from the grid, such clusters will be very viable for mini grids. But then you can also have dispersed population like farmlands where you'd see one household here and then the next one is like a kilometer away and, very dispersed. For those sort of rural communities, solar home systems would fit in. And then you have some that are like businesses, like a big farm in a rural community that needs power. So that one would fit in under, for instance, our energizing agriculture program, which is something we also just started. And yeah, you're right. All of these gradings are taken into consideration during the surveys, and it goes into the proposals, that eventually comes to us, and also the viability are also taken into consideration.
Right. So quickly, what's the tariff for the rural areas compared to what we have in the urban areas? Because I think it will paint the picture better. So what's the tariff?
So you cannot compare or use the same scale of tariff. Here in the urban areas, we do kilowatt hours or we do units, per unit. The tariffs are set like that. But for rural communities, you need to understand their psyche. You need to understand their language and how they think. They just want to know how much this will cost them in a month. So innovative ways, business models that have come on board shows that averagely 3,000 naira would be okay, averagely for a rural community every month, to get 24 hours electricity. Mind you, these people do not consume as much electricity as we do in the cities. They consume less than 1 kilowatt hour. What me and you know as 1 kilowatt hour or 1 unit in a day. Most of them are 0.5, 0.4. So it's just for lighting and charging. And, most of them go to the farms during the day. At night, they just on it for a few hours. So if you look at their consumption vis-a-vis what we do in the cities, then you know that, they don't consume much. So this goes into setting, the tariff. Also understanding their business cycles. You don't want to be charging them every month or every year. Sometimes when they go to the farms and they make money, in the farming season, they can pay upfront for a few months. And when they don't have money, you know that when the farming season comes, they'll be able to offset some of this. So the local players, the local developers understand the psyche of the rural people, and they've applied this in their business model. So averagely what we see for households is around 3,000. For businesses, it could be slightly higher, because they are making money and they can afford it.
Okay,
but,
so
it's not in doubt. The willingness and ability to pay for these services by these rural communities had been carried out long ago. And, they are happy, they are not complaining, they are paying. And what the developers are looking at now is to stimulate more demand so that they can consume more energy, right, in those rural communities, and they can pay more.
Stimulate more demand how?
So, for instance, some of them have now gone into investing in productive activities or productive use instead of just supplying electricity. So if they know that maybe a rural person, you're living in a rural community, you have like a grinding machine that is not very efficient, and because of that, you're unable to use as much power. They can invest in buying a very efficient grinding machine. Or if you are in a riverine area where you are in the business of fish fishery. They can get like a cold storage sort of appliance, for you. So you pay over time while you're doing your business. It's also part of the innovation that they've had to, because they need to sell more power to make more money. So if they bring in as part of the business model where they are providing appliances, efficient appliances that can also be run on their systems in rural communities, then they're able to
I was just going to say that, ask you about that, because when you're talking about how they're in rural communities and they're not using much electricity, there's been a quest to try and get rural dwellers to get into agribusinesses.
Yes.
So, for instance, even this rice, which was just displayed here in Abuja a few weeks ago, there have been questions as to whether they should be milled in the places closest to where they are farmed. When these kinds of demands come, electricity will be needed. Do you think that the renewables, as we currently have them, would they be able to meet up with the demand that this equipment might need?
Of course. We are doing projects in universities, as large as universities are, based on renewables. Milling machine would not be a problem at all. And as a matter of fact, we have 2 programs, one on energizing agriculture, which is looking to take care of specifically what you've just raised, and the other is strictly on productive use, funded by African Development Bank, which is looking at buying these equipments for rural communities, for small and medium enterprises in rural areas, that are currently, especially for those mini-grids that are currently running. So we are looking at all the angles. Really.
How effective an alternative do you think that renewables will be as we move on? Because we know that we're not where we ought to be right now with our electricity production and consumption. How viable do you think that renewables could be from what you have learned from the rural areas?
Renewables, the technology have been proven, the business models, the viability have been proven. It's not in doubt. But, for cities, there's argument for using it as complement, right, to the grid. But for extremely rural communities that don't have options, then it's the best, option and technology available, from our experience.
Well, we'll keep tabs on what is happening within your agency, but we have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Dr. Sanusi Mohammed Ohiari is Executive Director of the Rural Electrification Fund under the Rural Electrification Agency. Thank you once again for coming to our studios this morning.
Thank you.
Well, that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I believe that we have a few of your feedback just before we go. I've seen this one from Olagunju Oladele talking about addressing power supply challenges. He says, this special intervention fund for rural electrification, who maintains it? Is it the community or another intervention fund will be demanded to maintain it? I don't know if you can quickly answer that.
The developer, the partner, the private partner that we have will be in charge of operation and maintenance. But of course, they employ local players within the communities to train them, to help do the day-to-day, but they're in charge of operation and maintenance.
Okay, well, that's the feedback from Olagunju Oladele.
Yeah, that was just right on time. And then we've got this one from Polycarp about the Abba Kyari drug matter. He says, it is disappointing that both the police and the NDLEA are only interested in saving their battered image. An independent investigative panel should be set up to investigate these agencies, including the Immigration and Customs, on their roles in aiding the illicit drug trade. I expect the NBA to take the lead in this regard.
Oh, that'll be very, I don't know, is it tricky? But take a look at this particular tweet from ININA. Says drug use is intertwined with criminalities, thus security agencies must work harmoniously together before the polity is overwhelmed with drug-addicted users and cartels involved in dastard crimes in order to get monies to fuel their drugs, dealings, and passions.
Seems Yari is aping Enahena on that. On the issue of drugs in Nigeria, I'm of the belief that unless harsh laws are made for that area, we will continue to battle with the challenges associated with drugs with no chance of winning the battle. Now the question is, who is ready to make such laws?
Abila Kwara has this: truth be told, the biggest factor facilitating crime and criminality in the society is the uncontrollable manner or number of drugs in circulation. Armed robbers, kidnappers insurgents and other criminals operate within the influence of drugs.
Well, this one is coming through from Festus. He says, look, I studied in UK and US. Time for discussion on university tuition fees in Nigeria. There is no way we can have a well-funded higher education on the cheap. If countries like UK and US cannot afford cheap tuition fees, then time to stop deceiving ourselves.
You know, that's an angle of conversation we need to have. Take a look at this next one from Andrew Alola, saying development can't be achieved with disruptions in education system, aka ASUU strike, as well as energy insecurity, lack of electricity, long hours of power cut, and insecurity, which causes unabated destruction of property and lives.
Well, that's where we'll have to wrap it up today, this beautiful Thursday morning. Thank you so much for your contributions and your questions. I'm Yusuf.
I'm Kayode Okikele.
Make Nigeria great today. I'm Ayo Makinde.
I'm Chamberlain, so you know what to do, right?